So there's this new trend out um, where women are advising that other women should do this thing called decentering men. And I think it's genius. Um, Not for the women who are recommending it, but for the men who are winning. This is what I mean. I have this theory that um, the best way to beat a man is by making his women sick. That means, it's a plus if his mother is sick. It's a plus if his mother is an issue. If his sisters talk down to him. If every girl he ever dated treated him like a chump. That's the best way. I mean, even when you look at, war, a lot of times during a war, they kill off the men and they leave the women, right? If they decide to spare the people, right? So here's the thing. I got this theory that um, the guys who are winning, the guys up top, there's like the guys up top, the guys on the bottom, and then there's like these guys in the middle who are, eventually that middle is going to run out, but that's another conversation. Let's just do extremes, right? The guys up top, they all compete with each other. They don't really pay much mind to the guys on the very bottom because they got them locked. And so, while the guys up top are maintaining their position, because being at the top is very difficult to get there, and then when you do get there, it's an endless fight, right? So it's like, okay, there's no ambiguity up top. You either are the best or you're not. You're either rich or you're not. You're successful or you're not. There is no, oh, you got to look at somebody else's point of view. None of those things. It's just you're there or you're not there. That's all that matters. And people that talk back and forth, the more talk, the less action, the more on the bottom, right? Again, how does this tie into decentering men? Well, there's an order, there's a structure. You can never get away from this structure. Um, I'm going to use the blanket term God because most people can relate to it. God, man, woman, child. There is no other order. There is no other order. If you try to reinvent the wheel is still going to be round at the end of the day. So even guys who don't necessarily believe in conventional beliefs, there's always a power higher than them. They understand this. It's not difficult. Because here's how you know there's always a power above you. When you go to work, for example, you have a boss. When you were born, you had parents, whether they were active or not, whether they did the right thing or not. There's always a position of authority. So you got a highest power, and then you have, of course, being a man yourself. As a man, there are so many pressures that go into it because there are other men who are competing, right? And then once you do compete and when you do get certain things, you have to protect what you got. So, for example, when a guy gets a girl, it's a lot of guys that want that girl too, right? So it's like, how do you keep her, right? And I'm just talking from the human aspect. I'm not really talking that much about property and things like that, just kind of minimizing this. Now, of course, man, woman makes child, so on and so forth. Of course, that cycle repeats of, children, parents, whatever, right? Going back to decentering a man, a woman gets in her mind that she wants the men to be unstable. That's all that decodes as to me. Like, I want the men to be unstable. It takes a lot for a man to choose a woman. I really think that these days women are so out of touch. Because when a man chooses a woman and he invests in her, that is major. I think a lot of women minimize that, right? And I don't want to lean too much on the man's point because I'm not a man. It's just what I gather from, just having men in my life, you know. But here's the issue: a man is working hard to maintain structure, and he's working hard to provide and to have stability. And he chooses to invest in a woman that has this mentality that she's going to decenter him. Now, I've heard some women talk about, like, oh, as a woman, you're going to school, you're doing all this other stuff for yourself. Okay, here's what I have to say to the single women. To the single women who are out here thinking that your degree and your money and your achievements and your accolades, I said accolades, I guess, like this rivals a man's role in your life, you're mistaken on that. Especially if you're actually attracted to men, because I know it's a lot of women that get with guys just for whatever, but they're not really serious, right? But anyway, and I'm speaking as a successful, educated woman myself. I'm so grateful that I never got tricked into this idea that I'm doing so well that I don't need a man. Because there's this humanity that I'm happy that I never lost. And this is what I mean. Like, I used to think the whole point of getting an education so that you can be able to get a really good job is so that you can ultimately have whatever life you choose because you've worked hard to put yourself in a good position. Like, if you want to have children, you don't have, you can have them. If you don't have to. But either way, you can afford it, right? Now, I think it gets a little seedy for women because we get into relationships and then a lot of times we really, really like a guy. And sometimes that guy doesn't have his stuff together, right? Well, no, I would say a lot of times. And I think there's a difference between when a guy is young and he's trying to figure it out and when a girl is young and she's trying to figure it out. This is what I mean. I feel like in society, things are a whole lot easier for girls than boys. And that's not just me being biased. Even I have a son and a daughter, and the way that I deal with both of them obviously is different. But one thing I realize is that when my son is doing something, I'm really trying to make sure I understand what angle he's coming from or whatever. I really take time to process what's going on with him. My daughter, on the other hand, she can charm her way through just about anything. And I think that's still the nature of like girls and women, right? And I don't know, there's this double standard, right? This is the same with, I got brothers and I got a sister, when my brother say something sideways, it's like, who is he talking to? Versus if my sister say something sideways, I'll be like, yeah. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? And I think because a lot of times women oftentimes are handled a lot lightly than men, it's very easy for us to think that, it's okay for us to think of something as evil as decentering a man. Like, men are not trinkets. Like, men have been so devalued to where we are comfortable talking about how he shouldn't be the most important thing, but at the same time, we want a man to put us on a pedestal, even after we've done some of the most ungodly things. And yes, I say ungodly because being out here in the streets, having children out of wedlock, all that stuff, that is gross behavior. I know it's common, but it doesn't make it acceptable. And that's not to say that men don't have gross behavior, but the subject is looking from a woman centric perspective of decentering men. It even sounds gross coming out of my mouth, right? But anyway, this is why I think that the guys who women ironically talk down about, the successful ones that will never choose them, that will never give them the time of day, I think these guys benefit off of this rhetoric. Like when people get mad about Trump, for example, oh, he's a multi-billionaire and he's only making way for his billionaire friends. Let's say all that was true. The other side is a bunch of women beating down on the men. It's like Trump doesn't have to do, if Trump or any billionaire or any successful man that will never choose you is the bad guy, he's not your man's nemesis. You are. He's not the one that's making your man's life a living hell. You are. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to partake in what you got going on. You already destroying your families. You're already destroying your communities. You are already making your child's future difficult. Because you're so busy thinking about yourself and how you feel. It's not about you at all. At the end of the day, once you in that casket and put under the ground, we gonna have to live with the mess that you've made. Yeah, that's grim. But that's not as grim as talking about how a man shouldn't be the center. To decenter a man is to decenter yourself. Because any man that really cares about you, to think of him as like, oh, he's not the center, it's like, well, let's flip it. Let's say if that man decenters you. Let's say if you're one of many women that he gets to choose from, oh, that's a problem. Or let's say if, I saw this one clip of this guy, he was putting his children before his girlfriend or whatever. I've gotten jumped on because I say that your spouse should come before your children. But let's say if that man had the same attitude, decenter that woman, then he's the worst thing in the world, right? He's a bad guy in some kind of capacity. So that's my thought on the whole decentering men. I think this is worse than like the whole sprinkle movement where they're like, oh, you gotta be this and that before you come talk to me. It's like on one end, single women these days, they've gotta make up their mind. Either you want this guy to break his back for you, or you want him to treat you like you're something on the side. Because that's what I hear. Decentering a man, I want to be something to play with. But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion on that.